I am now pleased to introduce my colleague and friend who I have met a little over a year ago when we met at Ohio State. She was moderating a panel that I served on at Ohio State University, and it's just been a pleasure to work with her. And I'm just so pleased to be able to introduce her. And so Yolanda Owens, who is just really a breath of fresh air and just is a great person. I'm really excited to introduce her. She considers herself a homegrown Buckeye. She's a product of the Columbus City Schools. She developed a connection to food at a young age and believes that all students, especially underrepresented and BIPOC students, should have access to agriculture education in their STEM classrooms, really to connect to the land. She delivered a TED Talk in 2020, a TEDx talk in 2020 discussing this very topic. She and her husband tried to model this to their two boss daughters. Seriously, their initials are CEO. Through her husband's landscaping work and her role as the new pathways and partnership strategist for the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences at The Ohio State University, Yolanda is the immediate past president of the CFAS Alumni Society Board. She is the first woman of color to lead. She also serves on the Highland Youth Garden Board and is co-founder of the Black Lactation Circle of Central Ohio, a breastfeeding support group for Black mothers, and a continuation of her work to increase access and ancestral knowledge of healthy food, as well as a chief cultivator in Forage in Black, an apparel company at the intersection of Black culture and green thumbs. It is my pleasure to introduce Yolanda Owens, our moderator for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariella. I'm honored to even be asked to do this, and have always pretty much anything that you all have asked me to do in terms of being able to connect with BIPOC farmers and the work that Agraria is doing. It's kind of a yes always. so I'm honored that you asked, Ariella and Susan, and so thank you for having me here. And without further ado, I now myself want to introduce Reverend Dr. Heber Brown. So Dr. Brown is a community organizer, ordained reverend, and budding farmer who has been a catalyst for personal transformation and social change for more than 20 years. For nearly 14 years, he has served as pastor of Pleasant Hope Baptist Church in Baltimore, Maryland. While there, he launched Orita's Cross Freedom School in 2012, an educational program that celebrates African heritage and develops hands-on skills in youth. In 2015, he launched the Black Church Food Security Network, which advances food security and food sovereignty by co-creating Black food ecosystems anchored by Black congregations in partnership with Black farmers. He is the recipient of numerous awards and is currently working on his first book, which explores the historic relationship between Black churches, Black farmers, and faith-based food sovereignty. So without further ado, thank you for joining us, Reverend Dr. Brown.
Well, good evening, everybody. Good evening. I am so elated to be with you all tonight and to share in this phenomenal experience already, day one of this phenomenal experience. I just want to also just say thank you to the organizers of this dynamic event. Y'all, I got a chance to be in the green room before we went live, and these dynamic professionals are working very hard to make sure everything is lined up just right. And we all appreciate it. So thank you to those who've been doing the heavy and hard work of making this night possible. Well, family, listen, as been shared, my name is Heber Brown III. I am a Black Baptist preacher. Now, why does that matter? That matters to me because in the context of my congregational leadership, call and response is very big in my experience. This is not a Presbyterian church tonight. You will not offend me if you send some amens or ashes in this chat box. And I pray that something that's said tonight resonates with your lived experience, helps to feed and nurture your imagination, your prophetic revolutionary imagination. And not only am I praying that you are moved in some tangible and meaningful way, but I came tonight to co-create something with you. And what that means is I am coming because I'm hungry too. And so I can't wait for the engagement through Q&A, the conversation in the chat box. I'll keep one eye on this chat box as I'm guiding us through this presentation. But I want to tell a story. I want to tell a story about how I even got here. Like, how in the world does someone who went to seminary, got seminary degrees, preacher's kid, any other PKs here? We always roam around in these spaces a little bit. Where my PKs at? But how in the world does a PK, a pastor, how do you get to a place where now you're helping to steward and shepherd a national organization focused on farming and food? How did that even happen? I don't have all the answers to that, but I got some things that I want to share about my story that I'm prayerful you will find interesting tonight. I'm going to share my screen here, and what I want to talk about tonight in the course of, here it is, this presentation. I want to tag this talk, "It's always been bigger than food." I want to talk about Black churches and food sovereignty in context. And I want to begin by honoring Bell Hooks, whose writings on farming and the land are poetry. I want to invite you, please, to lean in to the essays and the writings of Bell Hooks, essays like Earthbound. You want to read it. It's as beautiful as that prayer that Sister Cheryl shared just moments ago. But in this particular quote, Bell Hooks says something that I think is very important for us to remember. I'll just read an excerpt of it. Bell Hooks said, "Living in modern society without a sense of history, it has been easy for folks to forget, don't miss this, that Black people were first and foremost a people of the land, farmers. It is easy for folks to forget that at the first part of the 20th century, the vast majority of Black folks in the US lived in the agrarian South." And that quote connects with my story and my family's story. That while I was born here in Baltimore, Maryland, I am still old enough to remember when every summer, as soon as school was out, my parents put us, my siblings and I, in that Buick LeSabre with that fried chicken in the back window alongside the potato salad. And they would drive us where? Down the country. That's what we would call it. Anybody relate to that? Down the country. Does that ring any bells in your experience? And we would spend the summers down the country at my great-grandmother's house. Her name was Mama Geraldine. She's an angel and an ancestor now. She went on to be with the Lord some years ago. But it was Mama Geraldine who was the one who introduced me to the mason jars. And she would have shelves and shelves of mason jars. Some of y'all don't know what I'm talking about, but I promise this is a thing. Mama Geraldine would grow her own food, and she would preserve her food in mason jars. In fact, I believe, though Mama Geraldine dead and gone, some of them mason jars are still here with some peaches in them somewhere. But Mama Geraldine introduced me to that. Going down the country, I learned what dark was for the first time in my life. Because Baltimore don't know nothing about dark for real. Down the country, with no street lights and no light pollution, it got dark, where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Or maybe the well water outside Mama Geraldine's house. And when my brothers and I, when it was time to wash up, Mama Geraldine would pump that well and get that water so that we could bathe. And because she was not going to waste no water, she would make us bathe together. Lord have mercy. I'm glad I survived it. But going down the country, I did not realize it then, Sister Yolanda, but I was being baptized into the agrarian nature and character of not just my family, but our people. Bell Hooks reminds me of that. And Bell Hooks helps to remind me that our story as African people in relationship to land and farming does not begin with slavery. I need to say that again just for myself. Please do not believe that the beginnings of our relationship with land starts with slavery. Oh, no, no, no. My research says that somewhere around 3000 BCE, African people in West Africa settled and began to establish agricultural systems around present-day Nigeria and Cameroon and Togo and Benin and Ghana. And it became known throughout not only the region, but even beyond the region, on the continent and beyond the continent, even the world, that there were some people in Africa who had agricultural wisdom and genius and insight, and they were the ones laying the blueprint. I feel like preaching already, y'all. I'm sorry, I'm getting excited. But they were the ones that laid blueprint for what it meant to develop agricultural systems. It's literally in our DNA to be in relationship with land, with farming, with nature. And here it is. A community farming in Ghana, West Africa. Can I ask you, and I'm gonna open up the chat so I can see what you say. What did you see in that clip? What did you pick up? What resonated with you in this small, quick clip of an agricultural scene in Ghana, West Africa? Let me see what you got. What you got? What do you see? Gladys says, I see beauty. Somebody said, I see community. Kevin said, I see a work song. Allison said, I see joy. Rachel said, I see love. Sophia said, I see ritual. Minister Aaron Hopkins says, I see rejoice in our work. Harmony, excitement, self-sufficiency, one accord. There's so much in this quick clip of farming in Ghana, West Africa. And the rhythm of it, I can't deny it, the rhythm of it. This is more than a production-centered scene. This is all the things you said and so much more. And you know what it makes me think about? It makes me think about that even in the ravages of chattel slavery in these yet to be United States, it makes me think about how our ancestors in the fields of this land, after all, so many things were taken from them, their names and so much more, you know what they kept in the fields? They kept their song. They kept the rhythm. They kept songs like, swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. They kept the songs. They kept on singing. That reminds me and lets me know that there were some things that slavery could not steal from us. And that relationship to land and music and culture and joy, those are some of those things. Chattel slavery begins to weaken at its knees, at least in that expression, and the Civil War begins and comes near its end. The growing number of formerly enslaved Africans are now disconnected from plantations, and as the Union Army is marching through the South, confiscating the land from Confederate owners and helping those who were enslaved on these lands find and taste a little piece of freedom. General William T. Sherman, pictured here, decided to have a meeting with about 20 African-American ministers. They met in Charleston, South Carolina in the waning days of the Civil War. And the general had a question for those who he was meeting with. He said, well, what do y'all want as this war is ending and as you are freed from these plantations? What do you want? And these 20 ministers said, we want land. The general said, well, if we were able to give you land, would you want to live in racially mixed communities, or would you want to live all by yourselves and on your own? And 19 out of the 20 ministers said, we want to live on our own and establish our own communities. The general and the Secretary of War at that time started to get to work. They issued a special field order to take 400,000 acres of that confiscated land from the Confederate owners and transfer it to formerly enslaved Africans. And from Charleston down to the St. Johns River, they began to apportion that 400,000 acres into 40-acre plots for those who were formerly enslaved. Somebody knows where the expression that this context is the context that gives birth to an expression, 40 acres and a mule. For those who know the story, as quickly as our ancestors received this land, it was taken away. And the promise was broken. The land was taken back and given and returned and given to the Confederate owners as a peace offering. And our people were kicked off the land, but somehow, some way, we still managed to own land in other places. In fact, as this graphic shows, near the end of the Civil War, there were 15 million acres owned by formerly enslaved Africans. But look at what happens. From the end of the Civil War, then going to the early 1900s, there's a slide. There's now 925,000 Black-owned farms by the 1920s. And then you go a little more than 50 years after that, there's 45,000 Black-owned farms. And then come all the way to present day, you got 1% of the nation's rural landowners are African-Americans. The graphic says Black land loss, but I like to say more aptly, Black land theft. Some of the factors that contributed to our ancestors and our elders having their land taken was pervasive federal discrimination and state and local structural dispossession like tax sales, air property conflicts, the domination of the industrial and corporatized agricultural system, and of course, racial terrorism as well, all contributed to Black folks' land being taken. It reminds me of one of our great ancestors, Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer. And while a lot of people boil her whole life down to 9 words, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer had much more to say than those 9 words. Here's one of my favorite quotes, and I just want to read it aloud for the record because it's so powerful. Listen to what Mrs. Hamer said. She says, food is used as a political weapon, but if you have a pig in your backyard, if you have some vegetables in your garden, you can feed yourself and your family, and nobody can push you around. Don't you hear in that quote that for Mrs. Hamer, it was bigger than just food, but rather food was a runway into something bigger. The ability to control and define our own destiny. Food can get you there. Land can get you there. A pig in a garden can get you there. When you talk about controlling our own food environment, we're more familiar with the inverse of that. And here's a historic example. An April 4th, 1962 memo from Mayor Arthur Haynes in Birmingham, Alabama. Because Black people dare to organize and fight and struggle and strive for justice, look at what the mayor did. In the second paragraph of this memo that I saw at the Birmingham Civil Rights Museum some years ago, I was astounded. The mayor says the city of Birmingham is going to cut off contributions to the surplus food program, the food charity program of the city, because the mayor was upset that African Americans were listening to the militant advice of the NAACP and core leaders. The mayor cut the funding for the food charity program. 90% of the recipients of the free food handouts were African Americans, and the mayor cut the funding. Now that should sound familiar, because even in present day and time and in past recent administrations, we can remember the threat to the SNAP benefits at the federal level and the organizing that had to happen to ensure that the funding for the food programs of this nation was not cut. When the mayor and the president or the governor can dictate the funding for your whole food environment, then you're in a situation where you do not have control. So many Black religious communities organized to help get more control over their own food environment. I'll just look at some of them, share with you some of them. Father Divine, Mother Divine, and the Peace Mission Movement out of New York. They bought farms in upstate New York, grew their own food, and then transported that food into the city to their own stores where they made their food available to the community and to their members. There's a model of an urban and a rural connection, building a bridge so that they would not be dependent on the benevolence of anyone when it comes to their daily bread. Then there's the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the Honorable Marcus Garvey. Some of you know that name. And many people just boil his life down to back to Africa. But you need to know that the Universal Negro Improvement Association also recognized that all Black folk wasn't going back to no Africa. Someone's going to stay right here. So what we're going to do here? The UNIA established grocery stores. And they even started a farm called Liberty Farm in Oregonia, Ohio. You won't find the farm there now, but the story is there that this revolutionary and Pan-African group recognized that farms and freedom go together. But can I tell you also about Bishop Ida Robinson and the Mount Sinai Holy Church of America? Arguably, Bishop Ida Robinson is the first Black woman bishop in the United States. She was sitting in a church and she tells the story that she heard God tell her to go out on Mount Zion and loose the women who were tired of being treated as second-class citizens, even in the sanctuary. Bishop Ida Robinson started her own church and had leadership where women were everywhere in leadership. But Bishop Robinson also said, and this is a church that was in New York as well, Bishop Robinson said, all of us Black folk that are leaving the South in the Great Migration, when we come north, we're surrounded by concrete and bricks. We got to get back to the land. She led her church in buying 140 acres and starting a farm in southern New Jersey. And her farm was not about production. Her farm was for rest. She wanted to have a farm up north so that the Black folks who went north could have a chance to get out of the city, come back to the land and rest yourself. I can tell you about Reverend Vernon Johns, the predecessor to Martin Luther King Jr. at the Dexter Avenue Church there in Alabama. Reverend Johns was a farmer, a pastor, a seminary president. He was brilliant. He started farm and city enterprises. He brought farms and churches and restaurateurs together to create Black-led systems and establish Black food environments. He also said that urban and rural African Americans should be working together to control the production of their elemental necessities on the farm and become merchants in the city. Grow it in the rural parts, sell it in the city, and support both ends of your community. Now, you know, we can't talk about Black folk and food sovereignty efforts without also mentioning the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam in the 1960s bought approximately 5,000 acres of land in Georgia, and they said that Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, said the farm is the engine of our national life. I dug up the archives and saw some of the headlines of their newspaper, and they had been talking about eating, farming, food, and food sovereignty for a very long time. I got to tell you about the Black Panther Party. You know it. The United States government owes the Black Panthers some credit for their free breakfast program, because the Black Panthers recognize that our children need to eat a full and good meal before sitting down in anybody's classroom. And finally, I got to tip the hat and give recognition to Reverend Albert Clegg out of Detroit from the Shrine of the Black Madonna. He led his church in purchasing nearly 4,000 acres of land in Western South Carolina and connected the congregation and the farm all together. Now, some of y'all might say, now, why are you giving us a history lesson tonight? I'm gonna tell you why. I'm giving the history lesson because this ain't new. This is our stuff. It's in your genes. It's in your blood. It's in your DNA. And I know you may not have been down the country in a long time, but your roots are down there. In fact, down the country check, I just need 60 seconds. My people are from Aden, North Carolina, outside of Greenville on my father's side, and Kilmarnock in Sunnybank, Virginia on my mother's side. I was born in Baltimore, but my roots are down the country. Can I just do a down the country check? Just shout out where down the country your folks are from. Come on, where you at? Tennessee's in the house. I see you. Montgomery, Alabama, Tuskegee, I see you. Sinclair, Missouri, I see you. A lot of Alabama's here. Look at y'all. Come on, Alabama. There it is, North Carolina. I knew you was here. That's my cousin. Kentucky's in the house. Guatemala, I see you, cuz. Roanoke, Virginia. Mississippi, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky. And for many of us, man, I wish I was right in front of you. For many of us, our families still own land down the country. Where you at? Give me an emoji hand or something, or put it in the chat box. If your family still owns land down the country somewhere, where are you? Where are you? Yes, Monica said, yup. Maine said, uh-huh. Linda, I see you. Yeah. So our roots are still there. This is our story. And how I pivot very quickly, and I want to make time for some Q&A. All of this history and all this information inspired me while I was pastoring to look at my own community differently. This is an aerial view of where I pastored. The bottom right corner where that yellow circle is, that's Pleasant Hope Baptist Church. In the top left corner with that yellow circle is a fresh food market. And I'm showing you this picture because, y'all, I started to see this pattern in my congregation where people were being hospitalized for diet-related issues over and over again. Sister Cheryl, I believe in the power of prayer. And when I'm going to the hospital to pray for the same people over and over and over again, something in me clicked and said, listen, there's got to be something more that I can do. I walked over to that fresh food market in the top left corner. You see how close it is to the church, right? It's right across the intersection. I walked into that room because they had nutrient-rich produce, and I wanted to pipeline it to my folk. When I walked in there, though, I caught the vibe that I was not welcome. And you ever walked into a place and nobody explicitly said this ain't for you, but when you walked in, you realized it wasn't for you? That's what I felt. I said, well, no, this wasn't made with me in mind or the people that I share life with and love. This is not the place I want to be in partnership with. And so, Ariella, I walked up out of that place without talking to nobody about partnership. And I was stomping back to the church that day, having a Holy Ghost hissy fit because what we needed was right at our fingertips and I couldn't get it for my folk. I get back near the front door of the church. I'm mad, divine discontent bubbling up inside of me. And it felt like God tapped me on my shoulder and said, Heber, why are you mad? I said, God, you know why I'm mad. What we need is right there across the street and we can't get it. Can't afford it. They don't want us to have it. And that's when I heard God say to me, Heber, look to your right. I was near the front door of our church. And when I looked to my right, y'all, this is what I saw. Now, I got to tell you, Rachel, I have seen this scene a million times before. I walked past it every day I went to the church. I looked at it. But it was something about that day, in that moment, with that divine discontent bubbling up inside of me, that God showed me a vision. I squinted my eyes and I said, wait a minute, that's not 500 acres. It's not 100 acres. It's not 1 acre, but it is a piece of the front yard that our church owns. And God showed me a vision that we could start growing our own food. I went into the sanctuary, and that Sunday, y'all, I preached my little heart out. I said, y'all, God has given us what we need to grow our own food. Let's start a garden. And we worked together and we did it. And because of our unity, spirit of unity, we were able to transform this into this. 1,500 square feet, kale, broccoli, tomato. Y'all, we grew corn in Baltimore City. Watermelon with the seeds in it, praise the Lord, right here in our church garden. And you know, it was successful not only because God gave us strength to do it, but I'm going to show you the angel that God sent our way. One of the members of the church helped to make it possible. There she is, Sister Maxine Nicholas. She went on home to be with the Lord in 2017. But y'all, she was one of those Black folk that came north from down home, from Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, came to Baltimore. And though she left the South and though she left the farm never left her. She came forward and helped to transform this land into the garden that it is today. And she began to show me something. Wait a minute. Every church I ever been to got a Sister Maxine. You know, the ones who get something done. If you want to get something done, you go to her. And I said her on purpose because she's a church mother. You know, she may not be in the pulpit, at the microphone, patriarchy, sexism, male-dominated spaces, but somehow Mother Neum finds spaces in Black church zones and flex their divine muscles to transform things. In fact, if you think long enough, you can name your own Sister Maxine at the church of your upbringing, the one who got stuff done. And then, Ariella, I also thought about the fact that every church got some land somewhere. and you know there's a kitchen nearby. If we don't do nothing else in church, you know we're going to eat. I started to swim upstream and connect some dots. And I said, whoo, if my church is experiencing these kind of benefits, what would happen if we connected with churches across, Black churches across the country, and developed like an underground railroad for food? What if we had like a green book for the churches that had nutrient-rich produce growing in their fields? I mean, do you think God would be more pleased with us if we took all the land that Black churches own and did something more with it than just cut the grass and make it look pretty? It gave me the idea and the thought to establish the Black Church Food Security Network. We're co-creating Black food ecosystems anchored by Black churches in partnership with Black farmers and accomplices. What do? We just take what the church already owns: parking lots, kitchens, land, vans, multi-purpose rooms and fellowship halls. And y'all know, like I do, that at most churches from Monday through Saturday, these assets sit underutilized or not used at all. It's a sin and a shame. Our organization works to activate what it is that these churches own. And when I think about the massive network of Black churches, you're looking and talking about millions of people through. These are just a snapshot of the largest African-American Christian denominations. And if you bring a fraction of these churches together, oh my goodness, what a difference it can make for our farmers and our communities. Our organization has a number of programs. I'll quickly go through a few of them. Operation Higher Ground is our church garden program. We go to churches and we help them start gardens on land that they own. Why? Gentrification. Why? Eminent domain. Why? We don't want developers in the municipality coming to take the land and the garden away. So we focus on Black church-owned land because it's a greater buffer of protection against the developers and the elected officials who might want to come get it one day. I love this picture. I'm showing all the teeth in my mouth. Why? Well, because I had this theory, I had a question and a hunch about Black churches allowing us to build agricultural infrastructure on the land that they own. And this is the first time we were able to do it in East Baltimore, New Creation Christian Church, where we put this infrastructure in place to extend our growing season. Here's a map of Baltimore. Every red area is a food apartheid zone, and the green circles are places where we have food growing churches. If you notice, our food growing churches are in the food apartheid zones. And I pray to come back to y'all one day with an updated map, because I'm going to push, and our team is going to push as hard as we can to have the red be overtaken by the green by utilizing what we already have in our community. This is our Soil to Sanctuary market, where we bring a Black farmers market to the church on Sunday so that after worship, people can come right out of the sanctuary and get farm fresh produce and other goods from Black farmers and producers. These Soil to Sanctuary markets become spaces where we also can show off our genius, even in our youngest members. This is Naima. At the time of this picture, she's 10 years old, and she was given a table to do her cooking demonstration for the elders of the church. Little Naima was so good at it that she won the state championship for child chef competition, and then got invited to Bravo, to the national child chef competition on national television. And she represented Baltimore well, but she was right here in that church, stirring up the gift that was within her to help her take off. I love this picture. The sisters from the mosque and the church mothers coming together in the church kitchen. Because while there may be religious distinctions, when it comes to peppers and sweet potatoes, when it comes to collard greens, ain't nobody fighting no religious doctrine over no collard greens. When we start fussing over greens, we all going to hell. We just gonna nobody gonna make it. We're not gonna make it. When the church mothers and the sisters from the mosque come together, it shows you the power of food to bring people together from all walks of life and backgrounds. I'm almost done. Our program called the Black Farm Tour, we get people back on the bus, and guess what we do? We take them down the country. We take them to meet people like Ashante Green, the Honorable Ashante Green, a farmer in Jacksonville, Florida, who's doing a wonderful job with her green legacy, with her farm and the green things that she's doing there. We take people to the farms like of Herbert Brown. And Herbert Brown in Warfield, Virginia, showed off his strawberry farm. And listen, if you want some jam, don't die and go to heaven until you eat this delicious jam from Browntown Farms in Warfield, Virginia. We take people to go see him, and we bring the members to get their feet on the sacred soil of these farms. We take people to meet people like Mr. Stanley Hughes at his farm in North Carolina, Pine Knot, historic 100-plus-year-old Black farm. And when we talk about all that was taken from us, there also is a point for us to remember that there's still some stuff we have in our hand. We take people to the farm. I'm going to fast forward through this next video because I really want to make sure we have some Q&A time. But you can go to our YouTube page for the video of our Black Farm Tour promotional video. And we're making a movie, y'all. It's really fun. Go check out our YouTube page. And finally, this is our program called The Ark. Pop quiz. What was the name of the person? For those of you who grew up in Sunday school like me, there was a person who heard a message from God to build an ark. What was that person's name? Make your Sunday school teacher proud. Look at y'all. Look at you. Your Sunday school teacher is proud. Inspired by that story of a flood, we were inspired to start this program called The Ark. Because when we look at the flood with respect to climate change, anti-Blackness, global supply chain interruptions, when we look at it all together, y'all, we got some difficult days ahead. And instead of relying on FEMA or the Red Cross, we need to be able to pull some things together for ourselves. And so the Ark is our food supply chain program. We're organizing food supply chains between farms and churches all over the country. We're focused right now on I-95 up and down the East Coast. We partner with truck drivers like my cousin Junebug. This is my real cousin Junebug in the red shirt. Junebug, the truck driver, he takes his big truck down south and picks up produce for us from Black farmers. We have churches to buy in bulk from these farmers. We load up Junebug's truck. Junebug comes back. We break down that big load into smaller deliveries on trucks and we drive it around the city. We unload it and deliver it to Black churches all over the cities. We're doing what our ancestors had been talking about in terms of connecting urban and rural together. This is a quick shot of where we are around the country, and it needs to be updated because every time I turn around, another church that's in another community that's a food apartheid zone says, y'all, we can't wait for charity. How can we link up with y'all and do this work together? We feel like every church can find a way to come alongside and support and be a partner to farmers. We want churches to consider ways to double dutch. I don't know if any jump ropers are in here, but we want to find ways for every church to double dutch into at least one circle on this graphic. Whether it's food processing, food production, composting, every church can do something. And we believe in study. We study. We can't just do. You got to reflect. And here are some of my teachers, my mentors, my friends, and great reads that I want to commend to you as I close out. Freedom Farmers by Dr. Monica White. Farming While Black by my dear sister Leah Pennyman. Dr. Ashante Reese has a dynamic book, Black Food Geographies. Please read Collective Courage by Jessica Gordon-Nimhart if you have not already. And I also want to invite people to study asset-based community development. And a great book to read in community is Building Communities from the Inside Out by McKnight and Kessman. When we put all this together, y'all, I can tell you that with the 190 churches in the Black Church Food Security Network and the calls that we are getting from the Caribbean and from the continent of Africa, something is going on. People are recognizing in the midst of this pandemic that we have to create the systems that we need to support ourselves so that we might thrive and sing and dance and have joy and harmony for ourselves and aid the planet that is under attack as well. I want to invite every farmer who saw anything worth connecting with. I want to connect with you. I want to have churches to partner with you and adopt you like people do, like corporations adopt highways. I see a vision of churches adopting farmers and being partners. I see congregations turning over their land and their kitchens and classrooms to help y'all in Ohio to further and create this Black food ecosystem that supports the dynamic work that you're striving to do and that you are doing. And even if you don't go to church, listen, I ain't trying to baptize nobody, so please don't believe I'm trying to take you to the water, but I am trying to water your imagination. Maybe church is not the place where you are planted, so that's not the place where you will bloom. Fine. But there's a fraternity, a sorority, there's a civic organization, there's a club, there's your family reunion, there's some space where you have gathered people with some information and with some inspiration will lock arms and push forward in this dynamic way of transforming our communities for the better. Thank y'all, family, for the privilege to share a piece of our story. And I pray that we stay connected for many years to come. God bless y'all. Thank you.
Reverend Brown, you just gave us a whole entire sermon. A whole sermon. I thank you so much. I know everybody else in this whole chat probably feels the same way that I do. And so thank you just so much for the word. I know a few folks were really wanting to have a list of the readings and even the whole presentation, which the presentation will be available on Agraria's YouTube page post conference. So after, you will have access to it, and so you can peruse through that and be able to go back in and get the list of books. Or if you're like me, as you put the pictures up, there are certain things I just snap pictures of with my phone. But absolutely. So I thank you so much. And I know that there are a million thank yous that are going on in this chat, but I know that there are probably very many questions that people may have. And take advantage of this, because there's not often that when you hear a sermon that you have a chance to be able to have a question and answer session afterwards. I grew up in a Baptist church. Like I said, I was like, my dad's family is from North Carolina. My mom's family is from the Caribbean and Central America. But on my dad's side, that's how I grew up, was definitely in the Baptist church. So I get it. I was like, oh, a question and answer section from a minister? Absolutely. And yeah, so I'm just excited to, especially the history aspect and the pieces and parts that you gave, and sharing the history and across the history, I think was a really important piece, not just in the vein of your walk and your Christian walk, right? But then sharing the breadth across the entire diaspora of how we've engaged in this work. So someone wanted to ask Tia, who is with Agraria, she was asking what year did you start? What was the year that you started?
Yep. So we started the garden at Pleasant Hope Baptist Church when I was pastor in 2010. And by 2015, we launched the Black Church Food Security Network. So the network is 7 years old.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you talked a lot about how it started. You gave all of this history. While I'm waiting for questions to come in here, what do you see as the future? As you talked about, you have right now, you said 190 church. That's a lot of churches, but 190 churches so far. And I'm sure you want more churches, but I'm sure that there's also a direction or there's something that what would you like to see as next steps?
So I think, thank y'all for letting me run my mouth tonight. I love y'all for it. I will say this, though. It's very important that I and we don't slide down the path of making me a superhero on this issue. I'm not a Superman. I'm your cousin. That's all. And as your cousin, I'm just showing you what we're doing on this branch of the family over here with this food network. And this matters to me very, very much so, Yolanda, because I think it runs contrary to the biggest revolutionary freedom dreams that we can have when we focus too much on an individual and don't honor the communal strength that we all bring to the table. Toward that end, we are in the very beginning stages of establishing local chapters. We have one out in Jacksonville, Florida, in DC, and in Baltimore. After this year of really working through how we can support local people in their own communities to do their expression of this work and help resource and cheerlead them, then there'll be other cities like Greensboro, North Carolina, which is there about to join. Philadelphia is coming. And so one of the great things that I want to see happen is, in the spirit of Ella Baker, that local organizing really is the star. That local cities are organizing with their, local people are organizing with their neighbors. And so that's what we see. And when we have that web working together, kind of like, remember those old grandfather clocks and the gears would kind of click together and start singing through the house? I see gears. I see a Baltimore gear. I see a Dayton gear, a Jacksonville gear. And so these big mega systems like the corporate food system, which we saw how weak it is this pandemic, local micro food systems that work in relationship with the other food systems up the road. That's what I see.
Okay. Thank you for that, because it actually answers a couple of the questions here. So essentially you're saying it's a decentralized system is what your goal is, to be able to have it decentralized and to give the power back to the people, back to the churches, right? Not necessarily, Reverend Dr. Brown holding it, but it's back to the churches. Absolutely.
That's right.
One person did want to know, and I guess this kind of answers that too, was how you would partner with the Caribbean. And I guess that would be that space of kind of allowing them the space to start their own. Absolutely. Now, if a church would like to begin and connect to the Black Food Church Security Network, how would they be able to get into that? I know it came up on your presentation, but since that's not up anymore, if you're able to just share that so folks can get that.
Sure, absolutely. We do monthly membership information sessions. The next one actually is this coming Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So any churches that want to get more information, have more of a dialogue with other churches that are interested, this coming Sunday at 7, we'd love to see you. I'll put in the chat how you can register for it. It's open to any ministry that wants to get involved. And here it is. We'd love to see you. If you can't make it this Sunday, every month we do it on the second Sunday night at 7.
All right. Thank you. Now, this is a really good question from Brittany Jones. And I understand where she's coming from. She said, how did you get through to people about reconnecting to the land and getting into farming? Mainly because so many people still often, unfortunately, see farming and connected to slavery.
Yeah. I think what was helpful for me, and I got to credit Dr. Melanie Harris in her writings on eco-womanism. I want to invite people to check out Dr. Melanie Harris and her book on eco-womanism. She talks about the power of story. And so when I was sharing about my big mama, Mama Geraldine, it helped to create room within me to honor the sacred of her story in relationship to land. And trauma is not there in that story about my big mama, or about my grandmother who let me pick some of the peas in the backyard. I probably was messing up more than I was helping her, but she always would bring me along to come with her in the backyard. So I would say turn to the story, and not to say all the stories are stories that are heartwarming. There are some difficult stories, but remember this. Reverend Richard Joyner out of Canida, North Carolina, told me some years ago that when he said, Daddy, why are we on this land? Why are we farming? I don't want to do this. You see all the hardship we're going through? We're being robbed. And Reverend Richard Joyner's father said to him, and Reverend Joyner is a farmer. He's going to be here in Baltimore in a couple of weeks with us doing some organizing. But Reverend Richard Joyner said that his father said, son, the land never robbed us. He said, and this is his dad's words, he said, the white man robbed us, but the land never robbed us. And in that short phrase, what his dad was doing was moving the trauma from the land. So that the land was not, in fact, Bell Hooks would argue that the land helped to shield us, to help us. I just got a Baptist quickly, Yolanda, I'm sorry. Because I think about how our ancestors, when they were fleeing from chattel slavery, many times would find water, get to the water. They learned how to read the moss on a tree. They learned how to read the stars in the sky. And the stars and the moss and the water and the grass was a partner in liberation. Don't get me preaching again. Let me stop. But I'm gonna just say this. Let me say this. The land was the scene of the crime, but not the perpetrator.
Listen. I don't know if I've ever said as many and amen in a whole keynote. That's okay. That is a-okay. Oh gosh, I'm trying to keep up with the chat. It is, things are pouring in. And people, I thank you for those who are sharing resources. There are a couple of folks who shared in the chat resources around the 2501 program and the funding for disadvantaged farmers and information around that. I did have a question from Minister Hopkins, and he had shared and wanted to know if you had reached out to, I want to make sure I pull down here, I think I might have missed it, to the Columbus Baptist Pastors Conference.
I have not. I'd love to get connected. If there's any way, I'll put my contact information if you didn't get it. Please, I'd love to come and share.
Absolutely. Awesome. And then another question another person had a question also with, have you met any churches where the congregation seemed to want to move forward in this, but maybe the church as an entity in their land not feeling comfortable with using it for this purpose?
It's not necessarily not wanting to use their land for the purpose, but there have been some churches where they weren't ready to step forward into full partnership yet. And whenever that happens, it's completely fine. We don't, take any offense from it, because this is what I know, they'll be back. But listen, with the nature of things and how things are going now, it's only a matter of time. And whether it's to our organization or to some other, I don't even want to put it forward like the Black Church Food Security Network is the only, not at all. But I do know that whether it's a church or whoever, all of us, no matter what our religious, spiritual, political, ideological identity might be, these issues will rise higher and higher on your personal radar if they are not there already. It's just a matter of time.
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm trying to, like I said, I'm just trying to keep up with the chat and all of the questions and the comments and things that are going on. Let's see. It's like there's so much information. If you have the opportunity to, for folks who are tuning in, I would possibly suggest that you even save the chat so you have access to some of these notes and links in this space. Yeah, and also just to the folks, because there are a ton of folks who are also in the chat who are sharing the talents and the resources that they have to be able to contribute to this. I even saw a young lady who was in the chat who was saying that she is in DC. Just so
hey,
you know,
cuz.
I was like, Marie, I wrote her name down. Marie says she is in DC and she is ready to volunteer. So, she said, Lord, use her as you see fit. I'm sorry, I have little people. It is getting close to bedtime and they are getting restless.
So that's life. Do not apologize. That's life. That's the reason why we're here tonight. Let them babies dance, scream, move the camera.
she was doing all of the things. Now, this is a good question. So we have a question from another minister, Reverend Cornell. He says, how do you envision participation from urban churches where land is difficult to access?
Yeah. This is why collaboration and partnership is so important. No one church has to do it all, and no one church has to go alone in this journey. And so while one church may not have the land, you got some cousins that do have land, but may not have enough people to really have the type of capacity to steward that land well. And so we are really working to, you know, and Yolanda, you know this growing up in church, churches can get into silos real easy and not be in collaboration and partnership. And so I would just say for those churches that do not have land, your cousins do. And if we can be helpful in connecting, then that's great. And if gardening is just not possible because you don't have land, if you have a kitchen and a multi-purpose room, maybe it's our Black farmers market. That's the thing that will most suit your church. Maybe it's our food supply chain. When we got that truck coming up from down south with all this good food, maybe we park it out front your church and you get this nutrient-rich produce to your people. And so there's different ways, different on-ramps to this work. Don't feel like gardening has to be the thing for everybody. Maybe it's composting, having your members bring their kitchen scraps to worship on Sunday so that you can compost and start creating your own fertilizer and soil right there in your church. So there's all different kind of ways to find an on-ramp. Don't think it's a one size fits all.
Is there, where would folks be able to check out to see the areas that the churches that are already participating? Because we have some folks who are interested and in different areas across the country and are interested or wondering if there are churches that are already participating in their communities.
Yeah,
I think Gladys is in St. Louis and was trying to see if there was a church in that area, roundabouts. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Send me an email, family. We're going to get the map on our website soon. We are trying to be thoughtful, though, about how we do that because we are very clear that everybody's not happy when Black folks start talking about feeding themselves and using what they have for themselves. We cannot be ignorant to history. And so we do not want to expose any of our members to unwanted and undue attention. So we're trying to work that through. In the meantime, shoot me a note and our staff will answer any questions. I think somebody asked about St. Louis and other places. So yeah, we got your cousins. So we'll do some person-to-person connections to make sure that those connections can happen.
With the food that is grown, is that just given away, or is there any part of it that is sold to be able to support the church? Because I know every church got a building fund, right? Like,
listen, you know that thermometer on that, they're still on their wall.
Still on the wall.
1972. What I'll say, so what I'll say is, yes, some churches just give it away. We encourage our churches also to think about putting a suggested donation price at least on what they grow so that that garden can sustain itself. And what we've been able to show churches is by doing that, that garden could actually come off your budget, off the church budget. It can take care of itself. And so there's ways to set it up that way. And so we do believe in not only for those that have the means. Now, if somebody don't have the means, you give them the food, no question. For those with means, for those who are going to spend the money somewhere anyway, why not spend it at your church? And why not spend it with Black farmers? Yeah, and so we don't have time tonight, Yolanda, but in another conversation, I'm going to have to write about and talk about what so many others have as well, about the ways that the past couple of years of this pandemic, with our communities being saturated with free food boxes, how it has undermined and cut the legs of so many small farmers and Black farmers.
Absolutely.
Because now people are not willing to buy from them because we got free food flooding our communities. And let's tell the whole truth, some of that food ends up in the trash because the community had no say in what they even wanted to go in the box. And so that's another whole conversation. But well, wherever possible, we believe in cooperative economics, and let's make that dollar turn and turn in supporting our community.
Absolutely. Let me see. I had one more question. Let me see if I can. I just want to make sure I don't miss anyone else's question. So someone had asked, Susan actually had asked, how do you see the Black church being able to bring to the forefront these issues around food access in these communities?
I see the Black church as a socio-political institution in the course of this conversation we're talking about, to a degree. That there's a spiritual dimension, absolutely, but there's a socio-political dynamic, and that's what I'm writing about in my book. Y'all, please pray for me because it's hard writing the book. Lord have mercy, Tim. I don't know how you do it, but when you think about the church as an anchor institution, and really a historic anchor institution in some communities that have long been neglected and forgotten and victimized economically, politically, and otherwise. I like thinking about churches as these hubs that can help to get things turning and growing and moving, particularly when there's a church that has the kind of theological identity that recognizes that this type of partnership, inclusivity, collaboration, and a broader ethic around seeing the handiwork, the literal handiwork of the divine beyond the four walls of the building. Those kind of churches, the soil is ripe for some really creative and prophetic partnerships. And so churches can get us there, y'all. Think about this for a second. If you combine all of the acreage of every Black church in the country together and tabulate in total that number of acreage, put that all together, do you know collectively, in that collective sense, the Black church community is the largest landowner in Black America? Think about it for a minute. All them kitchens, put them all together. Listen, with all the church vans, Sister Cheryl, just sitting on the parking lot, we can start 10 bus companies in every city in the US. And so that's the way I'm thinking. I don't want people to get nervous. Oh, he's a Christian pastor. He's trying to proselytize. Listen, I'm talking about sweet potatoes, kale. I'm talking about growing power. Food is a runway to something bigger. And we can have control, a greater degree of control in our own communities if we come together. And it don't have to be just the church. I had the mosque. We talked to our Muslim sisters and brothers, the temples, the Buddhists, Hindus. I'm grateful for all of the expressions of religious and faithful obligation. I'm grateful for the street organizations, the Bloods, the Crips. I'm grateful for the Kappas, the AKAs. Everywhere where people are organized already is the potential place, because everybody got to eat. And so it's a place for some really exciting stuff to happen. And I'm like a Flav. Anybody remember Flavor Flav? Public Enemy. April, you remember Public Enemy?
Oh,
I know that's right, April. So I've determined, Tim, one of my spiritual gifts is Flavor Flav. It's called Flavor Flav.
Oh, Lordy.
I'm a people pollinator. I love going around the country. And while as many people are pointing at me, I'm pointing back at you saying, yeah, boy, you got it. The power of God is in you. The spirit of the land and it's in you, y'all. It was in your grandmama, in your great-grandmama, my granddaddy, my uncles, and we just got to reactivate it. It's been made dormant as we've been flooded with all this crazy messaging, all this messaging that pulls us away from our truest sense of who we are. But we're going to get back there. We're going to get back.
Absolutely, we are. Absolutely, we are. Last couple of questions, because I want to be cognizant of folks' time. I also need to be cognizant of my little person's time so I can get her to bed. But I had a couple of folks asking around, have you all applied, or have you had churches that ever applied to be able to accept like WIC or food stamps and things like that when we're thinking about this general larger creating access, right? And so that it can be supportive or mutually beneficial, both for the congregation and then also for the church to be able to accept forms of payment. And then also if you all apply for grants to be able to do some of this work to expand it.
Yeah. 2 quick responses. 1, SNAP. So for a number of churches that have like a community development corporation or a nonprofit arm, it really makes it easier for that church to pursue those kinds of things. If you do not have that, I would say to the church, again, it's time for collaboration and partnership, because some organization in your community does have those resources. And it's no point in just doing it all over again. Why not just collaborate and partner with it where it makes sense and where there's values alignment? And on the second one, we provide seed funding for every member church. Every member church, we send $500 to help get you started with a garden or with a market. And then even after that initial 500, as we stay in relationship and keep walking together, we'll keep on going, find the money. We'll get the money to you. We'll work together to raise it. We are blessed to have a small number of foundation partners to help to fund our work. We're really grateful for that. And at the same time, we shall not live by grant alone. And so we are organizing in our churches. We want to be, let me just tell y'all, pray for me, y'all. We want to be on churches' budgets, their missionary budget, their outreach budget. And I don't care if it's $200, $50, I don't care what it is. I just want churches, because I'm a pastor, I've seen how high food registers on a church budget. I know churches are already spending money on food. And I know they're spending money on outreach. I want to help churches to steer some of that money in the direction of supporting farmers. Can you imagine farmers on the church budgets? Like not just buying the produce from them, but as an institution, investing in their infrastructure, helping to develop systems, helping to bring all those admin skills that's in the congregation, bring that alongside that farmer to support that farm. So those are the kinds of ways that we also love to support and think beyond the grant. I can't forget this book by Insight, Women of Color Network. They have a book called The Revolution Will Not Be Funded. And it helps to really to push us back to remember the things that we used to do before grants became so readily available. How we had what they call susus, how we put money together. We raised the money or had rent parties. Y'all remember rent parties? We found creative ways to fund the stuff that we felt were priorities. And so we love flexing them muscles too, because grants ain't gonna do everything, y'all.
Nope, not at all. Well, thank you profusely for sharing a history, sharing your part in this work, and sharing how folks can connect. And just so you know, some folks are still asking about some of the ways to be able to get more information of what churches. So if you can send an email to info@blackchurchfoodsecurity.net to get more info. Also, if you want to keep this conversation going, you want to keep the party going, right? Like, the Jesus turned water into wine, keep the party going, right? So if you want to keep the party going or keep the conversation going, what you can do is you can head to community.agrariacenter.org/s/explore. And that's where you can join into our social media conversation around the Black Farming Conference and continue this conversation where folks can be able to collaborate, ask questions. I know there are several folks who are fairly close to each other. They can collaborate and have conversations around their churches if they want to join or what that looks like, because that's what this whole entire conference is about, is for us to be able to come together to convene and create this network, but being able to have the platform to be able to converse with each other is the most important part. So I thank Agraria for being able to create that space and to hold this space for us to be able to do that.